Well, good morning, guys. Once again, it is I, the chairman, and I'm bringing you a review of the recent physical media that I've gotten. And so, the most recent thing I did get in was the Best Buy Steelbook of National Lampoon's Animal House, newly presented in 4K. And so this is the cover of it. And I kind of wish I did get the regular version with the slipcase because it does have the caricature poster, which is pretty entertaining because you don't get those caricature posters anymore, but they were a staple of those late 70s, early 80s comedy films. But on the back we have a picture of Emil Faber, the founder of the fictional Faber College, at which the film is set. And inside we just have some pictures of the cast. And it does come with the Blu-ray as well. So I have the 4K in the player already, so but that's what you see inside. And so I've watched a little bit of it, and it has that typical, you know, grainy John Landis film look, grainy gray look. All of his films that have come out recently, like American Werewolf in London and Trading Places and Blues Brothers, they all have that same look. It's kind of grainy. It's never very bright. I don't know why he just doesn't like to shoot in very bright light or that kind of setting. So it's a typical look. It doesn't look terrible, but you know, don't expect like Apocalypse Now or Shining level of 4K amazingness that you've been getting from films of that era. So I also did get in the Shout Factory Collector's Edition of King Kong, 1976. I think I mentioned this in another video, but did pretty much get done watching this. We started, my son and I started watching the theatrical cut, and the television cut, I should say. The television cut is like 3 hours and 2 minutes long, and for the most part, I mean, it does kind of drag a bit. After we got to when Kong gets to New York or he gets captured, we switched over to watching the theatrical cut, and that kind of speeds through. I was kind of surprised that it actually went pretty quickly from when Kong breaks out to when he gets up to the top of the World Trade Center, and then he pretty much kind of gets shot down. Unlike in the Peter Jackson King Kong, where they spend a lot more time after he breaks out, and then he picks up Anne, and they go off and start adventuring through New York. That all takes a lot longer, and you can kind of tell the difference between, say, like a more modern take where it's much longer, it takes a lot more time, whereas in this film they kind of speed through. Let's see, what was the theatrical version was how long? 134 minutes. So it was 2 hours 14 versus the TV version of 3 hours and 2. Obviously, they made it longer to split over, showing over 2 nights, and they actually retained that format. When you put the Blu-ray in, it asks you which episode or which night you want to watch. So you start with episode 1, night 1, episode 2, night 2. Only problem being is that I kind of don't like how it doesn't remember where you left off. I really don't like videos where it doesn't have that memory, so that it'll just start playing from where you left off. So you gotta go back, you gotta flip through the chapters, you gotta remember where you left off. So it's kind of annoying that way. But also, I did get finished watching. Sorry, a little bit of glare there because of take the cover. Blu Underground's, frankly, amazing, magnificent looking restoration of 1980's The Final Countdown, directed by Don Taylor, starring Martin Sheen and Kirk Douglas, James Farentino, produced by Kirk's son, Peter Douglas. And I can't say enough good things about this film. This film has always been one that I've liked and appreciated, but obviously I only ever watched it on TV, and at the time, you know, seeing it on TV, you don't really get the full impact of how really special and amazing the film looks, because with the 4K, you get exposed to the complete experience of being on the Nimitz. The film is set almost entirely aboard the USS Nimitz, the aircraft carrier, and you get an unprecedented and since then unprecedented level of access into the activities and operations aboard at that time, modern aircraft carrier, and what is probably arguably one of the most authentic and accurate portrayals of a modern military operation unit, if you will. Clearly, they wouldn't have been allowed to get that access to be able to film on the actual ship with the actual planes if they didn't portray it in as accurate and as believable a fashion as possible. I'm pretty sure I've not seen any reviews of it by actual naval personnel, but I'm almost certain that they would say that this film is about as accurate as possible. I mean, obviously, you know, it's a drama. It's an entertainment, so some things have probably been fudged in terms of like, oh well, a certain officer wouldn't be on the deck or on the bridge at this time because of this, that, or the other thing, or you wouldn't see these guys in this setting at that time. But for the purposes of telling a good story, while I'm trying to maintain as high level of accuracy and correctness as possible, I would say that The Final Countdown does as good a job as just about any other film. And one of the things that does help a lot is the fact that, except for only 3 instances, everything on this film was shot for real. And what I mean by real is that, you know, obviously no visual effects, nothing fake. You know, when they're up with the planes, they're showing the planes. They're flying with the zeros. The way they move is accurate. There's no speeding up. There's no trickery, basically. And that is one of the things that we appreciate with older films like this, is that because of the limitation of the time, they were, I wouldn't want to say forced, but they were certainly required to present an extremely realistic and accurate depiction of the activities, of the action on display. And you really do appreciate the reality of the planes flying, and especially the air scenes, and even just like the shots of the Nimitz sailing. And like I mentioned, there's only 3 scenes where you have a little bit of a visual effect. And just to backtrack and just explain the basics of the story. So the USS Nimitz is on a routine patrol. They are joined on board by Martin Sheen's character, who plays Warren Lasky. He's a civilian Defense Department contractor who works with his company and his mysterious boss, Mr. Tideman, and he's on board the ship to assess the operations and to write a report to the Defense Department. And so as they're sailing out from Pearl Harbor, they run into a mysterious electromagnetic storm of some kind, and then turns out they get transported back in time to December 6th, 1941, the day before the Pearl Harbor attack. So what happens is that you see them going through the storm, and that's a visual effect, but even that's not very, for lack of a better term, fake looking. And then the only other time in which there's an effect is when one of the helicopters blows up. And the only reason why they did that was because I'm pretty sure they couldn't afford to blow up an actual Navy helicopter. So, and then when they go back to the storm at the end of the film is the third time in which there's an obvious visual effect. Other than that, everything is done for real. And so that like I said, adds to the heightened authenticity and the accuracy. So even though the film has science fiction-y elements, it really gets pushed into the background, and so you're really just presented with a situation that the crew and Lasky are dealing with like what's happened. At first, they don't believe that they've been sent back because it's just, you know, they can't conceive of how this is possible, how it could happen. And then they're sent back, and then they realize that they are back in 1941, and they debate, well, what do we do? Do we actually go and stop the Japanese fleet? Because obviously the modern day Nimitz, they could easily wipe out the Japanese fleet. So they run into a lot of obstacles, like they have to shoot down a couple of Zeros. They capture one of the pilots. The pilot takes a gun. Well, actually, he takes an M16 and a pistol, holds people hostage. And so yeah, the film is also pretty violent as well. I mean, they don't hold back on the blood, like that standoff between the pilot and the crew. I mean, people get killed. There's a lot of blood around. So yeah, it's pretty unflinching in that way as well. But like I said, it's just a really good example of older film storytelling where the film's only 142 minutes long, but they pack a lot of story in, but they don't add anything more in than is needed. They don't really dwell on or explain even at all why this is happening, or what this thing is, or why did it go back to 1941, and why it gets sent for, and then why did they get sent back. You're just going along for the ride, and you're just in there with them as they try to figure out what to do, what happened, and what to do. So the other thing, like I mentioned about the Mr. Timon, because it had been like, gosh, since I was a kid the last time I saw this film, was that I was thinking, I think there's a twist with this guy, because they don't show his face. In fact, Lasky has never seen him, but when Lasky's preparing to board the ship, Timon comes up in his limousine, and Lasky is told by Timon's assistant, Mr. Timon has come personally to see you off, and he's like, okay, that's interesting. And then so yeah, there's an interesting twist that happens at the end with Mr. Timon. I won't spoil it for those who haven't seen it, but yeah, it kind of plays into one of the classic time travel tropes, but yeah, it's interesting. So kind of the reason why I wanted to bring up the good parts about the Final Countdown was that, to contrast with King Kong, made, you know, more or less around the same time, mid-late 70s into 1980. And so in the same way that the Final Countdown looks even better today because of the almost complete reliance on practical shooting, very little use, minimal use of visual effects, I feel that unfortunately King Kong suffers a lot when viewed today because of a lot of the glaring, I don't even know if you want to call it flaws, but just limitations on the visual effects available at the time, because there's a lot of times in which you're going to have Kong photographed, and he's a man in the suit. I think it was Rick Baker, for the most part, if not all the time, but for the most part, he's in the suit of his own design, and he's holding Dwan, the Jessica Lange character, in the full-size mechanical hand with a fake background, rear projection or matted in. I'm not sure exactly, but clearly there's a process where the three elements are being put together, and when you watch it nowadays, you can tell, okay, I see there's three different elements, because also there's times in which Kong is being processed in front of the background, or the background, and you can see through Kong. You can see through his body. So if he has trees behind him or in front of him, like, you know, like if I was turning around, you can actually see the trees through him. So unfortunately, that's just a limitation of the fact that it was still a photographed element. You had to put the plates together, and then you had to have light going through the plate to allow it to be photographed. And even though Kong's black and he's dark, some light still shone through because you had to have it photographed. So unfortunately, you get that element which maybe was not even visible on TV back in the time, but now with the higher clarity and resolution of the Blu-ray, you can clearly see that, yeah, I can see the trees through him. And so I think it's a case where, like I said, where the Final Countdown benefits from the passage of time, that we have actually a renewed appreciation of what was actually of the quality of the film. Something that Kong, through no fault of the producer at the time, because they were dealing with the technology that was available. Even though clearly the film had a high budget, they lacked they lacked for nothing in terms of talent. You had Rick Baker on the makeup design and effects for Kong. You were still limited with what you had, and you had to do everything photographically. And so you had times in which clearly, when you have Kong climbing up to the top of the World Trade Center, you have a fake doll of Dwan hanging on him. And that's always been the hardest thing to do pre-CGI, is how do you take a guy in a suit in a model, then switch to live action with the same location, full size, and then you have him interacting with a human, so then you have to show her full size, and then you switch to the picture of him, and then you have to show her, well, as a model. It's a very hard thing to do, and I don't begrudge any of the filmmakers of the challenge of having to handle that. It's just that, unfortunately, through our eyes nowadays, we've seen what they can do now with King Kong 2005, where even at that point, the CGI wasn't great, because you had the scene where the brontosaurus stampede, and that looked like crap compared to today, even though it was still amazing at the time. And it being almost 30 years after this film, I'm sure that, when I went to go see King Kong, I was like, okay, finally we can get to see a photorealistic Kong interacting with a human, and it doesn't look like she's sitting in a full-size hand matted with him as a in the suit, and then with a fake background. We at least got times in which you could buy the experience that everything was happening photorealistically. And then at times it still kind of fell apart because it was 2005, and you had some ropey CGI in certain places, but in other places, I mean, it looked great. Even the fight that Kong had with the V-Rex, it still holds up today. I mean, it still looks pretty good. Even he's fighting two V-Rexes. They're CGI. He's CGI. She's a CGI element at times because she's getting tossed around and he's catching her. But it was just something that obviously was clearly impossible to do in this film. And what I will say is that, to his credit, the parts in the film that don't involve Kong, or that don't involve process shot, still look, for the most part, look pretty good. I don't fault the guys at Shot Factory for the job, because they were dealing with the elements that they had. You can't make the process shots look great in any situation. Like, this wouldn't look good in 4K because it's just not as good of a original element as just a clean shot where there's no process involved. Those usually always look good in an increased resolution format such as Blu-ray or 4K. And even then in 4K, it still looks better than it would have in DVD. So would I still recommend getting this film? I think that this film would be more of interest to people who actually like the film, like the film at the time, and were fans of Kong, fans of Kong in general. But for someone who hasn't seen the film before and has no connection to it, you can probably do well not getting it, because it's not cheap, and then you're certainly going to see through the flaws, and you're going to be able to tell, yeah, this is just not that great. The performances are kind of hammy. Rene Auberjonois, he's kind of hammy. Charles Grodin plays the typical a buffoonish corporate goon. Jeff Bridges is pretty good, but he also has a very kind of hippie attitude. It has a lot of like, it's very of its time in terms of the uh, the overbearing, greedy, money-hungering petroleum company only wanting profits, and then the military comes in and all they want to do is just kill Kong. And Jeff Bridges is clearly on the side of Kong. He's you know, obviously very anti-government, establishment, corporate. He was probably a hippie in the late '60s. Dwan is played by Jessica Lange. She's like all into astrology. She's just she comes off as like a typical like Hollywood party girl. I mean, obviously she does kind of change characters a bit, have a change of character, I would say, as she goes through her relationship with Kong. But she starts off as just like, you know, obviously a party girl, probably did some drugs. So yeah, it's kind of it's a product of its time, probably more so than the Final Countdown, because the Final Countdown is focused on the task at hand. It's a military film, so everyone in there is a professional. They're doing their job. They don't let their personalities get in the way. So, I mean, even though I don't think these films necessarily compare, it was just that I was watching the two at the same time, and you know, I couldn't help but kind of compare them in that way. So, I've droned on for pretty long, but I did finally want to get to the one piece of music I got in, and it is the vinyl double album reissue of Blind Guardian's 2002 masterpiece, inarguably their masterpiece, A Night at the Opera. And let me get that closer. And this is an album that definitely deserves to be owned in the LP format, because you just look at that cover. Clearly you have a pretty crazy event going on, an opera, and you have the conductor, and it looks like he's about ready to lose control of his monstrous orchestra. And so yeah, this album is undoubtedly the greatest album from one of the best bands of the 20th century. Sorry, the 21st century, I should say, even though they started in the 20th century. Blind Guardian. It honestly is one of my most listened to albums. It's endlessly listenable. I could probably listen to this album every day. And I have had the CD. It was originally released by Century Media, and now it's been put out by Nuclear Blast. And I don't know whether Century Media got bought by Nuclear Blast, or if Blind Guardian, when they got signed to Nuclear Blast, they had the rights, so they took the rights to the album over to Nuclear Blast. But it came out in 2002. It was remixed 2011 to 2012, and then there are 2 tracks on the D side that were remixed in 2018. And obviously, I haven't put on the CD and the LP to compare, but it does sound a lot punchier. They're like the drums really come off a lot crisper, a lot sharper. Sorry about it. I think my camera just stopped recording for whatever reason. But anyway, like I was saying, this has now been reissued by Blind Guardian's current label, Nuclear Blast, and this is I guess it's a very limited release, and they offer it in different colored vinyl. So I got it in orange because of there is some orange on the cover. So I figured, well, let me get one. If it's going to be the same price, and like I mentioned before, I'm not super into the different colors of vinyl unless it's like the same price, so therefore there's no reason to not get it. So I got it in orange, like I said, to get that extra color. And it does come with a lyric sheet. And just to indicate how dense this album is, I mean, if you look at that's a lot of lyrics. There's like 10 songs, and like they packed this album with lyrics. So they really put a lot of effort and a lot of creativity into the production of this album. And Hansi and Andre, who are the mainstays of Blind Guardian, I mean, it's probably, like I said, it's undoubtedly their greatest work. And I honestly would challenge anyone, even if you don't like power metal or anything close to that, just listen to like, not even a minute, like 30 seconds of any song, and try to tell me that you're not blown away by how it sounds. It really sounds unlike unlike anything other than a handful of albums that I've heard in my life that just have that immediate like appeal of like the immediate feeling that, wow, I'm listening to something amazing here. Any 30 seconds of any 30-second bit of any song on this album, you get that feeling. And it's really hard to find an album that has every song that has that amazing ability to immediately grab you and immediately tell you that this is something special that you're listening to. There's very few albums that have done that for me, but Blind Guardian, A Night at the Opera is among them, and they've gotten close. You know, they've not dropped off in quality as much as other bands who, when they hit their heights, they went down precipitously. And I'm talking about great bands too, that they put out their best record and they haven't come close since. I mean, they've come close. Blind Guardian have come close, but clearly nothing has gotten really close or obviously surpassed A Night at the Opera. So yeah, definitely got to say this is a buy that I've been really looking forward to. I don't want to rebuy everything that I have on CD on LP because, you know, I'm gonna go broke doing that. Some, like I showed you before, I have rebought some things, but this is definitely one of the albums that I've been really wanting to rebuy on LP. So really glad I did it. So yeah, that's what's going on for now. Like I mentioned to you before, I have some more pre-orders that are going to be coming in. I think the next one would be Django from Arrow, and that's coming to me from Best Buy, and that should be shipping next week. So that's shipping to me, even though the Animal House was from Best Buy, and that was a pickup. So I don't know what's going on with Best Buy in terms of why some things are pickups and some things are ship only. So looking forward to that. Trying to avoid sales because of how much that's going to break the budget, but I have enough pre-orders coming in that should keep me busy in addition to all the other stuff that I haven't gotten the time to watch yet. There's only so many hours in a day, too many things to watch. So yeah, obviously I will let you all know how I feel about the stuff that I've seen and update you on any things that I have gotten. So until then, this is the Chairman, and I'll talk to you. See ya.